Hey, we're back doing the. I'm gonna adjust my seat. So we're continuing with our the Thunderfrog graphic, and don't worry, everybody. We are of course doing it at night again, as you can see from the lighting, and we are currently also uploading cards to the GameCrafter website, and it takes for freaking ever to do every card all at once. So I'm gonna ditch away occasionally, and
Yeah.
then there we go. See, for example, here's one right here. And I'm just going to go a little double tap action, and bam.
Bang, bang.
Bang, bang.
Okay, so double tap is done for the moment.
Yeah, so chapter 3. Okay, so when I was originally writing this, it's kind of funny, like, it wasn't my original thought process, but it ended up being kind of like following a trilogy pattern, because we were doing a 6-part story. We knew we were going to do black and white. So it made it more economical to do 6 parts. I might have done 5 if we were doing it in color. Adjust myself. So what you basically have is you have like the first 2 chapters are kind of like a fun. You can hear Molly, our dog, in the background. Kind of a fun one-off adventure. As the parts 1 and part 2. Part 3 and 4 ended up being kind of like your Empire Strikes Back story, where it's you really start building the story at that point, and the characters have a more serious adventure, and then get into, and you also learn a bit more about what the real threat is, and then it ends a little bit of a spoiler there. It ends with them being in the worst possible position. It's kind of like the George Lucas school of film writing, and then basically everything comes together in the big climax for chapters 5 and 6. So chapter 3, what we needed was a part of the story where we have to build the mythology, right? And we're going to look at this here as we go. But and this also kind of is where it's interesting working with Tayson, because I gave him a set of instructions. This is what I want, and then he delivers something like the monastery that they go visit. Looks really cool, but it isn't what I envisioned. But it fits the art style. There's actually something that's kind of a fun thing, is that so the idea with this structure was that it was actually an older, more ancient
21st century stuff. So
something just happened in the background. Okay, anyways, so it was supposed to be an older structure, right? Yeah. From some previous time period that the monks moved in and took it over, and then adapted it and built it to their needs. So that's why if you look really close at the picture, there's multiple kinds of construction in its building. But the original version had a metal fence around it.
So it's kind of like in number 2, you have the bridge that's basically built out of multiple kind of things as but time goes on.
But the point being here is that the fence that the monks were using was made of metal, metal rods, right? And so I talked to Tayson, and I'm like, where'd they get the metal? And he's like, oh. And so he went back, and this is actually what's a kind of fun thing, is that Tayson, he draws these things. He does digital editing or digital inking, and it's kind of funny. We've had a lot of people compliment his inking, actually, but he just went and fixed it, and it was no big deal, which is really cool. Fun to work with him. So and then I also thought the birds were an interesting touch, because he put these birds, and they are nothing like Earth birds.
Yeah, it definitely has the entire part of the comic book that I do like about is that it is an alien world. It is its own world. It's its own kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And just looking at the art, it's just you can see this that mosh podge of how when an older society basically crumbles, and you utilize the resources that that the society that now has it.
Yeah, because there were a lot of structures in Europe that people moved in on, and then they just expand. They either tore them down to build other things, because that's why some of the older Roman structures are gone, because people ripped them down for building materials.
Like a great example is the
Hadrian's
aqueducts. Oh yeah,
Hadrian's Wall is gone because they used it for building materials. But like, in this case, like where I'm looking at closer to the picture, right? Like you've clearly got a central building, and then you've got 3 other structures built onto it with 3 different kinds of construction. It's like the detail is actually pretty cool. And then, as the characters move in and they find that the place has been massacred, and it's like it kind of gets into like the characterization too, because you've got like, Theo has gone there to find his uncle, and because his uncle is really an educated man, and they were actually made this detour hoping to get information about the hammer, to like learn, like figure out what to do with it, because nobody really knows except that it's just powerful. And they go into this situation, and again, like we're talking about, Alex and I come from an RPG background, and in this particular case, if you're operating off of RPG rules and you walk into the situation, you're like, oh my god, tactical moves. Okay, check the bodies, check the area, make sure we're secure. Everybody, hold the perimeter, right? And Theo's like, bye.
Yeah.
Need to find my uncle.
Well, it's kind of like almost. Theo reminds me of that young character that young player that goes in and goes like, "Wow, what trap? Like what's going on? I've got to save the day. I got to check my uncle.
Right.
I got to do all these things." And it's like, here's that fish hook. I'm going to get onto that hook, line, and sinker.
Right, and I like that reaction for the character here, because it's like this is what a real person would do. Is they would forget about the danger and concern themselves with their family, and that actually I like it too, because Theo's kind of like afraid because he's in this but it's not that he's a coward. It's just the fact that he's not experienced. He's not prepared for a warrior's lifestyle, so he tends to hesitate. But when it comes down to like a situation like this, he's like, oh, I'm gonna go find my uncle and make sure he's safe. And it's like that's not the actions of a coward,
right? I mean, it's that kind of level of without experience. Obviously he's wet behind the ears. Besides being a frog,
yeah.
And but he does hop into the situation like a frog.
And it's actually kind of funny because you bring in the the new RPG player, right? So I'm a GM, game master. I don't like the term dungeon master. I want to set that very clear. So I'm a game master with literally about 30 years worth of experience under my belt, and basically making me like the most senior player in our group. But you over the years of doing this, you tend to find trends and behaviors with certain players, and if you're really bright about it and pay attention, you can pretty much play people like a fiddle, exploit people's behavior. We have this friend who this megalomaniac kind of behavior, and you can always count on him to be insane, which is why he's not with us anymore. But our friend Luke, he went through his rookie phase, and he still to this day gets mad and complains about this one incident. He's like, you freaking played me. So what we were doing this fantasy martial arts campaign that I had come up with, and I had allowed this magic item that I found in an issue of Knights of the Dinner Table, where it's a earring that you throw it on the ground and it blows up, and it damages based on a percentage. Right. So you roll a D100 essentially, and you get the damage, right? So it's like basically a nuke. So I thought it'd be fun to throw this thing in, and Jeff, our friend Jeff, had the earring, and Luke has kind of jealous that Jeff had something so cool, and they had found this ancient little ruin thing, and inside the ruin there was an area down below with this circular chamber with all these little kind of like these alcoves. And one of the alcoves had a glowing light in it with a person in a golem. And And the other players are like, well, we are not touching that. And, I'm sure you wouldn't either. Like, anybody that's got any level of intelligence is like, whoa, dude. In fact, anybody that's smart probably would never have gone down there in the first place. But the guys were going around checking the place to see if there's anything that they could salvage, and they were leaving that alone. And then Luke, of course, being the rookie, I tailored the description to make it tantalizing to him. And he looked a little closer, and everybody was just kind of like ignoring him and going about their business. And then it's like, oh, it's wearing one of those earrings that Jeff has. And I knew how bad Luke wanted it. So he's like, I'll go get it. I'll reach in to get it. Guys are like, no. Slow motion. It's like, stop what you're doing. But, like, Luke, you reach in and you break the field. And doing so allowed, the thing to wake up. So I made Luke the scapegoat to release the monster. That I intended it too, but it was just like one of those things where you know what you can count on.
Oh gosh, having the player and basically going like, power on a string, come on.
Yeah, I know.
Come on.
I basically tricked them into releasing the monster themselves, and it's great because I would have been more clever if it had just been Jake and Jeff. But because Luke was there,
right.
as the rookie at 15. Anyways, that's my funny story. So back to this. So let's see. Let's get a couple pages. And, I like this scene where Theo climbs up through the window on the second floor. The place is in ruins. The instructions were that it had been ransacked, right? Like, the people that came here were looking for something. And I like the look of Theo's face, like just the shock, like, like, oh my God,
Oh, yeah. It's very expressive.
Like my uncle, like, he just...
like that realization.
Alive? Yeah.
And I think that's like what really comes on is that realization of like how bad everything is.
Yeah.
And it's just really great of like how he's it's not really like fear, but it's like not personal fear,
like worry.
but it's worry.
Yeah, and I like this part.
He's distressed,
where he breaks through the door of his uncle's room, and you see all of these arrows in the bed. And it's funny, I never noticed until just now, but there's a hand laying on the ground, and it's like, and Theo's freaking out because of the hand. And actually, that's one of those little editing points because we probably should have had the dead body more in the frame, and maybe we could do that for the graphic novel. I don't know, but there's a couple of panels that we had to fix, but I mean, there's not necessarily a reason to, because you turn the page and then you see him looking at a dead body, and then you got the other two characters show up there, and they're they're very upset. And this is actually one thing too. So we had Quad here, right? And he came in the room and he's angry because Theo took off, because like the Chosen One does not leave his protectors,
right?
But I actually added a little of a frustration vein to him, where because I realized that we needed something more to establish the expression, because like we have Helene going huff huff because clearly she's dead, and they're all sweating, which is, they wouldn't be sweating actually in real life because animals don't generally sweat, but it's
who knows about like humanoid animals,
right?
Maybe they have certain sweat glands,
sure, and
on their foreheads,
right? And but what ends up happening here is that I added like the throbbing anime vein to his head, because we needed something, and it really did help sell the scene. And then on the next page, it's like, what the hell is wrong with you? Like the spit flying out of Quad's mouth was great.
And it's great. It's almost got this like Donald Duck or Daffy Duck kind of look, but at the same time, it's so unique to Tayson's work.
And there's another line here which I think is also really cool, where it's like basically Helene's like, hey, if a member of your family was in danger, you'd react the same way, like thinking, not acting. He's like, actually, I wouldn't, which is interesting.
But I think that's kind of like one of those things that helps bring out the character.
Well, the thing is there's more to the story, right? Like this character, his backstory was already determined before we even wrote, like before the first panel was drawn. So it's like there is like a deeper mythology to these characters. And then now this also, the bottom corner panel here is interesting. So Tayson's really cool artist, but there are like occasionally we have a little issue where, okay, one of the things he likes to do with his art is he likes to take the bottom corner bleeds off the page, right? But he wasn't always thinking with the amount of space that's actually needed. So when we formatted the, because like what it is there is like what's called like the live area, and all of his, oh, that's weird. There's a glitch in the panel. Oh no, okay. The screen was rendering. I'm like, do I have to fix something? So the panels themselves have to fall within this live area, and we have a template that came from our publisher we use as a guide. But you've got like your, you've got the live zone, which is in the middle, which is where all this stuff needs to go. Then you have your, basically your border, and there is a trim line on the border. And the idea where this comes about is the fact that originally with like the kind of printing techniques that were available before we had more, fancy digital printing, there was a risk of a lot of drift because they were doing this on newsprint machines. Because like the size of a newspaper, or sorry, the size of a comic book is actually a newsprint quartered.
Yeah.
Which is where the size came from. Yeah, but people watching this may not know. Anyways, so you have this drift space that you take into account. Anyways, Tayson would do these really cool pages, but like the characters would bleed off too much. And then if you faithfully, like trimmed it, like this character, you'd have like, cut off right in the middle, So with that one, I actually had to shrink the size of the panel to make it fit. Normally it wouldn't be like this. And this is one of those things we might go back and fix at the graphic novel phase. I don't know. But like this panel had to be shrunk a little bit to make the character fit, which is why it looks a little funky. But it's fine. It's actually kind of a neat effect because it makes it look like they're further away. It accentuates the further away aspect of it.
Yeah.
Though I think what I might want to do is when we do, maybe we we'll take and extend the bottom of the panel, when we color it.
No, I get you.
So it's flush. I mean, that would be easy to do.
Yeah.
Anyways, and then we get this little flashback where Theo talks about like, I remember this thing where that like he basically had this whole business of he was a little kid here with his dad, and he sees people coming out of the room, but yet there's no way in and out. So he's like, there must be a secret passage in there. And I like the effect he did for the flashback panels. Like one of the things in the Transformers comics they do a lot, where and I see this in other books too, where flashback panels have rounded corners. Right.
Oh, right. And even with like manga, I've seen like where you get a real iconic kind of feel to like what's going on, and that's always a good way to keep it this is the present, here's the past.
Right. But the funny thing about doing it that way is it's been done so much that if you read a lot of comics, you just suddenly automatically know that that's a flashback, and it becomes ingrained in the language. But I thought the way that Tayson did it here was really clever. But we also enter into another interesting point where, like you've got a sound effect. Now, this is one of the things that we had to establish early on in the development phase of this thing, that Tayson likes to draw his own sound effects, and they look really great and they integrate well with it. But the problem you have is that in the process of you kind of like with movies where you have the script you write, you have the script you film, then you have the script you edit, right? And when it comes down to the final, you're working with the final artwork, it's not always clear, like the text and the sound effects don't always match up with the final art, and you have to make changes. And more so with indie comics, I think. But the problem you have is if I have to go in and add a sound effect, I can't go back necessarily to Tayson and go, hey man, I need to add a sound effect here, and because the artwork's done, right? And so the problem you run into is that the digital sound effects and the ones he do, especially if they have to be on the same page, they don't go together, and it's very visibly obvious that they don't go together. So we ultimately had to do a thing where the sound effects have to be done one or the other, and it's gonna have to be at my end. I actually was hoping to find maybe a collection of fonts that look like they're all handwriting, so they might look good with Tayson's artwork. But I've only found one font that looks like it's like that would work
organic enough.
It's there aren't enough things like that out there. It's unfortunate, but I also really liked the effect. Oh yeah, again we got the crack effect. That's Tayson doing that, and then I thought those looked really cool. But like I like the effect because like we had this problem with the page where okay, so somewhere in this room is the entry is the thing that activates the secret compartment, and Tayson. I didn't really have an idea about where it was going to be. I just like, hey, let's come up with something. Like, you're the artist. Can we figure out something fun? And Tayson came up with a really cool idea. I mean, it's like, how would they do it? I don't know. I mean, like, it's a button on the globe. So how does that work? I don't know. But it's cool, and so I'm cool with that. But I liked how he put all the blocks of different locations, and you had, Quad's like, and kind of get the idea that he's studying everything because Quad's the rogue thief character of the party.
Yeah,
and it's a neat effect, like a way to illustrate his abilities. Because this is the classic roguey kind of character, and
I love his smugness.
Yeah, I know, that's really cool. But then you also have an example here of where we have the fonts not going together because you have the push sound effects that Tayson put in and the click. He did those, but then the little thing pops open, and I had to do a flip sound effect.
Right.
And it's small, but it's like if you look really close, it doesn't go together, right? So that's part of the reason why we had to pick one direction or another.
Right.
And then we're going into the darkness, and this is another effect I really liked, where, so Theo gets the idea of using he just has ideas, right? Like he has no, it's kind of fun. Like this character is very clever, right?
He once again, it kind of going back into the role playing thing. It's kind of like the rest of the group is the experienced players that kind of like not maybe necessarily do certain tropes, but like has that classic kind of I do this is the story, to basically start the adventure. You start at A, B, C, D, and finish with whatever. But like with
Theo.
Yeah, Theo, it's like, hey, this sounds cool.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of...
This works.
Well, see, they need a source of light going down into the darkness, and I thought it would be a fun thing if he used the hammer as a source of light. And then we're doing like I literally used Snap, Crackle, and Pop. Just a little, nod back to my childhood eating Rice Krispies. Right. But like, and it's also an interesting point where you've got Helene saying, hey, shouldn't we get the rest of the party? She's a bit more equipped for these sorts of things than Theo is, even though she's just as like young and experienced as him.
Right.
Mentally, she's more prepared. But I like the effect that Tayson did because I didn't have any direction necessarily for this other than, but like I think I may have mentioned that we found to see him as silhouette, but he basically did this whole effect where you reverse the colors, so the white is the black. And you kind of just get the idea, right? But he's got this weird glow line, so you know that's emitting light. And it was a neat effect. I really like how that turned out. I'm really happy with that part of it, the page. And then you have like the ambush, like looks like evil cultists, and then it's like, oh, these are the monks. And Alex, what do you think of the idea that the frogs have hair? Like Theo doesn't, but like one of the frogs, the first dead frog we saw actually up close had hair on his head. We know that his father has hair, and this guy's got the Fu Manchu kind of beard,
It doesn't really bother me. Yeah. I mean, it's just like it's something unique within this world. I mean, it's almost like the birds.
Yeah.
The birds are obviously not normal Earth birds or otherwise. Mm-hmm. It's kind of that regards of, okay, wouldn't that be a character that's actually humanoid?
Yeah. Well, again, it's one of those things where there is like because we talked about like there's actually a science fiction element to the story rather than, even though it's all set up to be fantasy, and or I guess more like I would kind of classify it as an adventure story, but there is a reason for all these, like I didn't choose that detail. It's one of the things that the artist brought to it. But if you look at the actual backstory of this world, which Tayson's well aware of, it makes sense if you think about how all this stuff came about. So,
but definitely, it's like his spin, the way that he puts on the details of the characters, making them have unique attributes, like having frogs with hair, and like having the mastodon, the horse Tar.
I call them war horses.
War horses.
Yeah. Oh, there's another interesting thing too. Is like, so we're on the corner of this page, and the bottom corner, I basically had to shove the text up into the corner, and basically it's kind of shoved in a little. I looking at it now, it feels a little clumsy, and I might have done that bit of block of text a little differently. But it's an interesting point because like we have this background, it's all white, and if we were out of space, I actually could have lowered the size of the panel, like dropped the panel down a little bit, cropped it like a quarter inch at the bottom, have more space at the top if I wanted to, and the because it hasn't been colored yet, right? And I can certainly do that. It's my comic book, and Tayson's cool. Like, he's not gonna give a fit. It's kind of funny. We rented this artist. We were talking to different artists one time while we were looking for a replacement person for Countermay, and I was talking to this artist and showing him my lettering abilities and handed him a copy of Cyber Symbiosis, and the guy kind of had a fit because I was covering up artwork. And like, well, where's the text gonna go? You know, and he was one of those guys where he's like, no, it's all about the artist. You know, kind of had a screw the writer viewpoint, and it's like, I own this book. The artist is working for me. You know, it's like, just talk yourself out of a job, buddy. But you know, it's kind of a funny thing where it's like, you can do whatever you want. You own it. The artist has no rights. I mean, like, he does. Like, I'm not an asshole. Like, you know, like, obviously I give good terms to the artist. I share, you know, I let them profit from the work in ways that other guys might not allow. But it's like, at the end of the day, you know, we got to make the story work, you know. And
right. I mean, it's like, it's the big thing of not only are you the writer, but it's like, this is part of your company. So, I mean, it's a different kind of thing of like how, you know, talking about like other companies where you got like Marvel, DC, certain aspects of Image, Dark Horse, and you know, the list goes on. But it's like a lot of those individuals are a writer that just happens to do something within the company.
Yeah.
It's a different thing of like being an owner, being the person that says like, okay, this is my vision. This is like, you know, my property. This is like when doing, say, Thunderfrog and Cyber Symbiosis, it's a whole different type of beast than doing like Countermay or doing like just going on to like different type of things like X-Men, for example. Like, if you got hired to do X-Men by Marvel, you would be told like, okay, this is the type of things, and you know, there might be the fact of like who really owns it or who basically says like what's the working relationship.
Well, like in the say Cyber Symbiosis over here, which you're blocking, but like in that particular case, I mean, Eric's a great artist. We're glad to have his contribution, but he is just a hired gun, you know, and you know,
but I mean, that's like my point of like, you know, it's a different thing of like when you've got one individual that's a hired gun, and the other being an owner, opposed and a creator,
right?
So it's like your double duty into it of like, unlike some of those other bigger companies where you have two hired guns that basically need to make a product, your vision is also implemented in the creation of being a letterer and a writer.
You're talking about me, right?
Yeah.
Well, and in the case of Thunderfrog, I mean, because of the fact that we didn't have any money, you know, we did have the good fortune of finding an artist who believed in the project, was passionate about it. Like, he needed a big break too, right? And this definitely got him, like, working on this project was certainly good for Tayson because it gave him a good surge forward in a number of areas. But it's like, you know, he does have basically a 30% ownership stake in the book. You know, I mean, I think I'm basically a let's see. I mean, it's like it's hard to quantify, but I mean, like, I obviously own the largest controlling stake, but I mean, and then of course, you know, Thunderfrog, Harrison, has
Thunderfrog's do, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like Harrison basically has the smallest percentage, basically having basically owning the name of the book and the likeness of the character.
So unlike that normal kind of thing of like how I was making the example of X-Men's Marvel's X-Men, where the company Marvel owns all those characters, the book, all the intellectual property within it. So it's like it would be basically like the difference would be Harrison would be like Stan Lee.
Yeah.
You would be like Chris Claremont, and you've
That's
got
very generous.
Yeah. Well, it's like one of your favorite writers.
No, he's the
and
best,
going into it, it's like, and then you would have like Todd McFarlane or Jim Lee or some other type of creative talent.
Yeah.
And it's the fact of you and the artist are the hired guns that are doing part of this project.
Yeah, and but the part about this where it kind of comes around to what actually got my attention on the subject matter is like, so I have the ability to come in and I did this actually several times in the course of this book where there were several panels where I had to shift things around. I think I probably should have on this one a little bit more. Like looking back on it now, I would have laid out that panel just a little differently.
Oh yeah, but I think that also goes into your skill set.
Yeah,
of like how much you've grown as a creative.
And, I would, but the thing is I remember. So I was watching a video from Comic Pop, and they were talking about the Irredeemable Ant-Man, and it's interesting that like hearing Sal and the other two guys go on about the story, it sounds really fun and entertaining, and then when you actually read the comic book, you're like, Jesus Christ. But there were it was a weird layout because they used a 16-panel grid.
I have seen that before.
I think I showed it to you actually.
I have seen other people that have done 16.
And it's a really weird way to make a comic book. There's a lot of close-up shots of people talking, but there were a couple panels that really stuck in my mind. One in particular where like you have a writer. When the writer delivered the script, and then it goes to the letterer, and you have an artist that did not think with the script when he drew the comic book, and you have this one panel where it's covering up like half the chick's head, and it should have like what you really should have done was gone back, sent it to a graphic guy, and basically trimmed a quarter inch off the bottom of the panel, drop it down, extend the top, and put more color up there. But it wouldn't matter because it would have been covered up by the word balloon. Who cares, right? Yeah. And like that, then it would have been fine. But it looked really weirdly out of place. Anyways, let's keep going. Okay, so now we're going to get into story time. So in this part of the story, this guy starts filling them in on what happened here and how like the monastery came under threat, and they basically. A few of them volunteered to stay behind and die, so that they could protect the secret society while to put on a good show, while the rest get into hiding. And it's a kind of a tragic, necessary sacrifice to make. Reminds me of some of the plots from Stargate Atlantis, actually, where the Wraith race would come to cull people and take their food, and some people would let themselves die intentionally, so that the Wraith wouldn't find everybody else who's actually keeping their real society hidden. But I mean, and again, like, look at some of these monsters. Like there are monsters like these creatures here. Like the rabbit is just savagely. And then we got the next appearance of our rhinoceros character, who ended up becoming more important later in the story. He won't look quite so violent in book 2, but it's looking at the silhouette. It's just. I mean, Tayson was instructed not to do something, and he just like head flying with like blood shooting out, like it's almost being propelled by the blood, and it's just like some of the violence of this. And
but the way that the silhouette is, it's like I have to say, it reminds me of Samurai Jack in the respects of like before Adult Swim.
Yeah,
you had a lot of times where Samurai Jack would like destroy robots, just hack, and there'd be these great scenes. Oh yeah,
the oil.
Oh god, but there's like these great scenes where it's like you see arrows flying, you see like body parts, going, and it's just the fact of like within the silhouette, you just have that kind of that iconic. You're not seeing the gore, but you know that it's there.
Right. They went as they skirted that line as much as they could. Now, there's another interesting thing too. So we have this villain character, the general, who's in charge of this barbarian army.
Yeah.
And he is an interesting character. And now, what we were talking about designs of animals when we were creating this comic book, and I didn't want something that was just basic and ordinary and the same thing that everybody else has, right? So this character is a lion, but he almost looks like a porcupine, right?
Yeah.
And we wanted something that was a little different, right? And so he kind of gave him this weird, come on, Paige, cooperate, but this weird kind of this, I don't know, just this weird spiky head of hair. I did not want anything that looked normal. And so, and then you look at some of the soldiers under his command, like this beaver looks like he's going to mess you up. And who would ever think a beaver could look cool? You'd almost want to play that guy. and this pelican thing, it's like a pelican. Like, and he looks
no
like
briefs about it.
Yeah, and he does not look like somebody that you want to mess with. But this rabbit, I swear I've seen that somewhere before, but whatever. It looks awesome. So, anyways, and then we get into a talk about, you know, the hammer, right? And it basically gets into the idea that there's a destiny to this character. And Theo,
right before you do, but like, I love how this gets into like one of the things that I can say that some properties do really well and some properties don't do well. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I actually have to say, like, even with Star Wars, with when you had Palpatine basically talk about Darth Sidious. Yeah. It's the mythos within the world. It's the stories within the actual world. Oh, no, you're
thinking of Darth Plagueis.
Oh, Darth
Plagueis. Darth Plagueis, yeah, because he is Darth Sidious.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyways, but it's like, so there's a part that's coming up where Tayson illustrates part of the book from the culture. And I love it because it just really adds to, like, the culture of the world, what they believe,
and they're basically established this idea that only the chosen of the gods can wield the hammer. And Theo's like, but I'm just a farmer. And of course Quad's like, yes, you've proven my religious faith. You know, I should know. I followed a few. You know, kind of. he's absolutely certain that his religion is true, and he's absolutely ready to just grab hold of any evidence, no matter how flimsy.
Yeah,
I love it. But and this is actually the point in the story where Theo starts to believe, like, wait, am I? You know, and because so we had this book, right? And the book was basically I had some text talking about, like, the history of this world, and I did talk with Tayson and explain what really happened. But here we have what this celestial tale of great wars and gods and once walking among men. And so he illustrated this whole story from the viewpoint of, like, it's basically what it is it's a story of some past event, kind of like, you know, in Game of Thrones, so you have the you know, the legendary heroes and their age, and the story has been changed over time and altered, and like a game of telephone. Though I found out sometimes in the South they call it rumors, and they call it other things in other parts of the world. Anyways, but you have the story of events that transpired, and this is basically how they were ultimately interpreted. And there is some truth in this, I will say, but also some of it's very perverted. Anyways, but like
but I think that's like one of the things that really makes it interesting is that it's got a very a feel of, like, medieval Western history of, you know, this is something that could have, you know, been just that misinterpretation.
Oh yeah, and like some of these stories of ancient gods of our world could have been about people, you know, and it's like even modern religions have lost so much, you know, of their actual history, you know, because there's sections of the Bible that are missing. and it's just. But anyways, I like the design. Like, he made the book feel old, like, it had chipped edges of the paper, and we talked about that. That's something I really wanted. And there's all these like visual clues in here of the actual story that eventually you'll come back and go, oh yeah, if you keep reading the story far enough. Did we talk about the Anodar joke, like where that came from? By the way,
I think that should be kept for a later episode.
Okay, I just don't remember if we talked about it in a previous video.
What the well? Either way, I think we should keep it for later.
The name Anodar means something. It actually has nothing to do with the mythology of this world. It's a joke from our game group that I keep putting in my stuff because it's hilarious. All right, fine. We'll talk about it next episode. Now, interesting thing, in the bottom right hand corner on this one page, there's a little guy with his arms up, and he gets hidden, and it's because we're looking at this on the computer screen, I can't track which page it is, but basically you've got the frog holding the book, right? So the second page where the book is open, there's this little thing in the corner that's covered up by text blocks. The reason why I put the text there is because I looked at this little guy. I have no idea what that thing is. I don't know.
Just one of those things that Tayson does.
I'm not sure Tayson even knew. It wasn't in the script. It wasn't supposed to be there. He just threw this thing in the corner because it's like we had to put something there.
Right.
And I'm like, what is this? And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's where the text is going. And then, okay, so here's another thing. So we have this story of the original Thunderfrog hero that Theo is kind of like the modern version. He's the new Thunderfrog, but the original wielder of the hammer was a frog, which is where the legendary Thunderfrog comes from. And you'll notice that the heroic proportions of this character are way blown out of proportion, because this is what the people are imagining, because they've grown up with all these legends, and they're like, oh, this great hero, right? And this guy is like a freaking He-Man. The original one was not this big.
You mean he doesn't have muscles on top of muscles and steroids?
No, steroids have steroids. And so you have all these characters here, right? And then you have this tower that they find, which is like the Tower to Heaven or whatever. And I will say that later on in the story, we'll eventually do them all. Actually, the only thing that would stop this book is if Tayson quit. Like, I couldn't see finishing it without him. But in book 4, the fourth, because I planned the story to be 6 graphic novels eventually. In the 4th graphic novel, this scene here, where they go, the original adventurers go to the tower. We will see that tower in the future. I'll give a little spoiler, and we're going to find out what actually happens.
How much of a difference?
Yeah,
and I mean, this is almost like going back to your statement about like Game of Thrones. There are parts where this is what's told. Mm-hmm. And then what really happened?
Well, history is written by the winners, and sometimes, the history is written by people that were on the winning side, and like rarely does the person who actually involved himself in those events feel the need to write them down. And like the actual hero is usually not so arrogantly involved with himself. It's kind of like I can understand that, because like I'm the guy that goes out there and I'm like, oh, there's a kid who needs guidance, so I'm the one, I step up, right? And I've done like all these things. Like there are people that, I mean, like, oh my God, you saved my life kind of thing, and I'm no. All I was there. There's like a young kid doesn't know how to pay his bills, or whatever. Like, you go up to these young people and, okay, look, this is how you pay your car insurance. This is how you keep a checkbook. All these little things, right? And sometimes they end up worshiping you, and sometimes it's just, oh, thank you very much. Like, somebody needs to show me this stuff, but it's like, you usually the people that do those, like, that's the goodwill that society runs on, right? Like our civilization operates because the majority of the people are decent and kind, and it basically immediately invalidates the idea that mankind is basically evil and you need police to keep us straight. Like, we don't immediately descend into anarchy when left to our own devices. Who knew? But yet it's interesting that the majority of those good deeds go unknown, and like you've, like I've just run into this before where it's like, somebody's like, well, blah 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 blah. There's all this like shit going on. I'm like, are you sure you're looking at this situation correctly? Anyways, and then we have the final big zinger at the end where the heroes go into the tower and they come face to face with this mysterious thing, and there's a monster that they're looking at, like, and then that'll be talked about in the next chapter 4, I suppose. But we wanted to end this one as like, oh, you have to go in and read the next issue, but actually 3 and 4 go together, and the monster, like the design for the monster, like it's kind of be neat, like when I finally get to show what the monster really looks like, as opposed to how the legend remembers it. But
it's like I definitely like how the difference between this is the story that has been passed on, and this is actually what it is.
Yeah. The only thing missing here is I probably should have God damn it. Bad timing for a sneeze. I probably should have been. Oh, you know what? I think there is a version that does say to be continued, but like what ended up on the website, because so some of these website files came from like I had a graphic novel edition of the book that I did, which we're finally getting around to putting together, but some of those to be continued moments weren't on it, and we had a hard drive crash about a year and a half ago, and a lot of stuff was lost, but just enough was retained that it wasn't like a total catastrophe. Fortunately, all the comics were uploaded to the printer, so the printer sent me back PDFs of all the books, so we have masters.
Which was definitely an awesome thing. I mean, it's like sometimes don't have that kind of opportunity.
Yeah.
But it's like, it really does say, if you're looking to do comics or anything creative, make games or make novels,
back up.
Well,
the thing is, a lot of stuff was backed up, but some things weren't. And I didn't realize, like with Cyber Symbiosis, we lost the first 2/3 or half of the book. Like the original Illustrator files, right? So I couldn't go, like some things I can't go back and fix easily, and some things I can, or like you have to redo it from scratch if you want to fix something. In the case of Thunderfrog, the book was done. It had been done for a while, but the issue is that if we ever wanted to color it, we needed, because like when you upload stuff to the website, the web files are lower resolution than these, and so some of the files that are going up on the website are actually coming out of like a recovery file that because the recovery file is all web quality. Who cares, right? But the anyway, so like to be continued should have been here. It isn't, but I think it is in the actual print book. But again, these two issues are meant to read together.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of, in the graphic novel, it certainly doesn't need to be there.
Right.
But it's kind of funny though when you do like trade paperbacks and graphic novels from Marvel, like they often will leave those, moments. And those are fine when you're reading month to month because you need that thing to get the person to go, oh my god, what happens next? Yeah. Which is what I was doing here. But if you read it in trade,
it becomes such a different.
You have this
beast.
Page. It's like, and it's the next page. You're like, that doesn't feel like the way it should be.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite work. And in here, it was written though specifically for that. Like, you have this like, oh my god, what is this? And you turn the page and there it is. It's like, exactly mirroring each other. And so, anyways, Alex, so you weren't directly involved in the production of this issue much, were you?
Like I did the coloring of the cover, and this is definitely one of the. I love the cover on this for number 3.
Yeah,
I just love the way that he's holding the hammer and all the people behind him.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few things that you had to do in the later issues.
Right.
Like I know there was one page where Tayson had an idea that looked good in pencil, and then we actually got the ink version. It's like that doesn't work, and then we had to, and we'll talk about it more when we get to that point. But we literally had to like crop and change the shape of the page, and actually I was really impressed because you had to make a tree, and you made the tree so well that you cannot tell that it wasn't there to begin with.
And, I don't even actually remember.
Well, we'll talk about it, but like, we'll see. Occasionally, like, Alex, we need to fix this thing, and it's like, I do not draw like this person. How can you expect me? That's this ongoing discussion.
Yeah,
it's like,
we need. hey, you're a writer. You should be able to write like Stephen King. You should be able to write like J.J.R. Martin. You should be able to write like, yeah.
Right, but I mean, and that's of course the argument we keep having. Yeah. But Alex's role is actually very critical, and when you're making a comic book, you do need this
duct
guy.
taper.
Yeah, well, because there's always something that because it says like you're doing indie books, you get the artwork, and sometimes you don't really get a chance to look at it too closely until maybe a couple weeks later. You've got to keep your artist rolling, and you have to keep moving forward. Now, you get these things in, you look at the pages, and like we were just looking at one right now, we were working on this Insulin Shock book, which will be coming out in a bit, and the artist is really good, he's a little bit inexperienced, and we also have these issues with the language barrier, where the guy, he's given me a good deal, and I'm, doing my best to make sure he's getting something out of the deal, but he's not expensive, but there are things he makes mistakes on, and sometimes you have to just let it go. And it's like, okay, well, does it really matter? Do you make him redraw the page, or do you kind of run with it? And sometimes he just run with it. Sometimes it's like, because there was a mistake he made where, like, the wrong character was on 3 pages, and it just completely ruins this. You just have to fix it. But there's also things where, like, we have the scene with the Space Needle, right? And the city looks pretty good, but the Space Needle is wrong. But to go back and make the artist fix it, if he didn't draw it the first time, maybe not gonna fix it right, maybe whatever. But like the fixes on that, some of these fixes you need are so small that it's to stop production of the book, to send the artist back to fix this thing. It's not worth it, because you sometimes have to pay them again. Whereas you got a guy like Alex who's involved in production of the book, he's like, oh, it takes 5 minutes in Photoshop.
Yeah. It's duct tape.
Yeah, and like in the case of the Space Needle, we're probably going to just make the ring bigger and maybe stretch the top of it a little bit, like just a couple little things, and it'd probably be fine. And it's a lot easier than going back and trying to explain to this guy who his command of the English language is not as good as it should be. Like, but then also like maybe he feels insulted to have to redraw it, So, and it's very helpful, I gotta say, a lot of these books would have been derailed without it,
Well, it's definitely been quite interesting. So, I've got a background within fine art and graphic design, so it's kind of been this nice level of it's kind of a unique thing where a lot of fellow graphic designers don't actually know how to draw.
Yeah.
A lot of them do not. They basically will work in typography. They will work in graphic symbols.
Yeah.
And just basically, manipulate things on a page or like on a digital thing, or put vinyl together or whatnot. And to have like some of the skills of having, I can draw and I can do digital duct tape.
Well, another aspect of it too is, and I've run into this with plenty of artists. I mean, it has happened with Harrison, where like, they don't like being told that they made a mistake, and where, because we had that happen a few times. We were doing the Anunnaki book where the pages that were turned in, actually, it's maddening how much I mess with it, but like the pages that were turned in can't be printed because there's like the allowances that have to be made for because like as we were talking about earlier, there's a publishing scale and you have to have a certain amount of border space, and there were no allowances made for some of these things, and because of the configuration of the artwork, you can't
it becomes that difference between like
it almost becomes
here look, you can see this side, but
and it almost becomes a nightmare scenario, like in and not being not having Alex's skills. Some of the things I had to do to make these things work, it's like I basically, like when we were doing the charitable anthology book, we had the sequence at Harrison, which is really cool, where you had looked like a film, like a piece of film going across the page, and you had these little film cells, but the problem is one side didn't go far enough. And we can't fix it because he already got it colored before sending it to me to find out if it was ever going to work. So I had to take little samples of the page and crop and basically build the film panel out further, and it worked. It was a frustrating project, but like there's one page that Alex likes to call the retarded baby page, where like the page again, like the page was unusable because like we couldn't make it work, and the solution was to basically, because like without getting into much detail, you basically had a massive screen which was the exposition, but the screen went completely off the page, and suddenly if we had sent it to the press like that, nobody would have known what they were looking at. And so is it a flashback sequence? I mean, like, so what we ended up having to do was shrink it to the actual size it needed to be, and then we basically
put in the filler.
Yeah. What were we calling that? It was called kibble.
Kibble.
Because that's like, so on Transformers toys, like Optimus Prime's smokestack is called kibble. It doesn't do anything, but it's there to sell the illusion that he's a truck, right? And so we were calling it kibble, but it was, we basically took all these art asset pieces from all over the issue, all over the book, and then using them to build the wall.
Actually,
did you invent some of that? Did you draw some of those?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. Actually, I just took from that page. I didn't even go to other pages.
Are you sure? Because that's not what that. I'm absolutely certain that's not what happened.
Spotty memory.
Okay,
perhaps,
good. Well, because like
no, I just remember that it was like.
Well. I mean, that would have been too obvious if you'd done that. But see, like, what it is like this is. Because we were creating effects.
No, I did because I knew how to basically cut and duct tape things together.
I'm absolutely certain you pulled some images from other pages, but we basically had to take these Egyptian type symbols and put them around the thing so we could sell the idea. Anyways, it was an interesting project, but that's again where like Alex is a guy like that is very helpful. So if you're putting your team together to build a comic book, do not squander on the lettering for God's sake. I mean, like, you got your artist that you need to hire, but you also need somebody that knows how to use Photoshop. That's just, at the end of the day, you're going to run into trouble if you can't do that.
Oh, no disagreement. It's like, have a solid idea and a solid script and something that, is coherent, but it's like readability definitely makes a difference. Yeah. I mean, it's like having something where it's like, oh, that looks so cool. What does it say?
Yeah.
Or like, wait, is it that character or this other character that's saying something? That is a failure.
Yeah.
But it's like, but lettering is definitely an important thing. But having your stuff actually, if you are looking to do this either semi-professional or professional or, an expensive hobby, it's still worth your time.
Very expensive hobby.
Yeah, very expensive hobby. It's like, it is definitely worth your time to like know the programs and know that,
or
even
have
like,
somebody that does.
And it's like, even if you are looking to basically put something online and you have a great idea, putting it onto DeviantArt, putting it onto Facebook, putting it onto Pinterest,
it's actually kind
Instagram.
of reminding me of something.
The whole point that I'm going to say here first is that, like, think about print. Even if you go like, oh no, this is just for fun. I have heard so many people that are at cons that go like, oh my god, the first part of my book sucks, because I had this idea that I was going to just put it online and be this art thing. And I'm selling these books, but I don't really want to do the first one, but I need to move forward because, well, this is a job.
Yeah. Well, I was actually reminding you, you kind of reminded me of something where, so that sci-fi Western book that I was helping the guy with, or lettering on, there was a scenario where the art, the guy basically overpaid the art. Like, he had an artist that wasn't as good as what he was trying to buy, right? So, and I think he overpaid, but the colors that he got, you have this robot, right? And the robot's got these light effects on him and like eyeballs and things, and it looked very flat and kind of uninteresting. And I remembered having seen this in the Transformers when they launched one of these series. The Transformers tend to have these like glowing spots. So what I did is I just took that color and I put say it had a third eye, I drew around it and made a gradient fade effect so it looks like it's glowing, and boy did that just pop. and like that's something I did in the lettering phase, but it's like made it look like it was actually glowing, and it looks so dynamic and interesting. We are almost at an hour. This is the longest commentary, and we're deviating heavily from it, but hopefully people find this useful information.
Yeah. So either if you're here because of Thunderfrog, the comic that you picked up, or the nerdiness of
or found this video randomly on our YouTube channel. But
a little slice of life of how to make comics and the joys of it.
Hopefully the next video we record will be during the day.
That'll be experience.
We could next Sunday. Who knows? I may not have to work. Sometimes I have to work on Sundays. Okay, well, we'll see you guys in the next one. Yeah, we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.